I don't do this often, but I'll combine two projects in this video because they both have a theme, Valentine's Day, and are both straightforward. If you're looking for a handcrafted gift to make for your sweetheart, either or both of these would be a good choice. And giving them doesn't have to be restricted to Valentine's Day either. They'll make an excellent birthday, anniversary, or any occasion gift when you want to give something as a lasting symbol of your love. As they only contain a few inside cuts, even a beginner should be able to make these. I made them from oak, but you can use whatever you have. Neither requires much wood, so this may be one of those occasions where you can use up some of those pieces of exotic wood you've been saving for a special occasion. Let's make some sawdust. I started with a piece of oak a little wider than I needed for the first project. I used my table saw to rip the board into two lengths. I made one a little wider than I needed for the pattern, leaving a narrow strip a bit longer than I'll need for the base. The base is a rectangle with rounded corners, so I won't even bother attaching the pattern. I'll cut the length to the final dimension and round the corners at my disc sander. I used scroll saw tape to attach the main pattern to the larger piece of oak, and I've already drilled the two pilot holes for the inside cuts. I lined up the pattern's bottom with the edge of the wood because I knew it was straight and I was ready to get started on the scroll saw. At the beginning of every project, you must decide what size blade, or blades if there are multiple pieces, to use. The factors I take into account are the hardness of the wood, the thickness of the wood, and the complexity of the pattern. The first two factors point to a number 9 blade, and since the pattern doesn't have any small or intricate cuts, I don't need to adjust the size. If you would like a more detailed description of blade size choice, I'll leave a link to my video on that topic on the screen and in the description. I'll be using a number 9 Pegas modified geometry blade for both parts of this project. I always make the interior cuts first, so I started with the heart shape inside the heart that was used as a substitute for the letter O. The bottom of that shape ended in a point rather than a curve, so I cut it differently than if it was a curve. I cut from the pilot hole down to the point, and then I backed the blade to the pilot hole. I pivoted the workpiece 180 degrees, backed the blade's dull side first to the point, and then it took only a tiny movement to align the blade for the cut up the side. I followed the line around until I arrived back at the point. The other inside cut was even easier, just an oval for the inside of the second O. This letter wasn't shaped like a heart, though. It was simply an oval O. It only took a few seconds to make this cut, and then I was ready to move on to the long outside cut. For this cut, I merely followed the line from one side of the pattern to the other. There was a lot of twisting and turning, typical of many scroll saw patterns. I use a lighted magnifier and a foot switch with my scroll saw, two accessories I highly recommend. The second project is a little more complicated, but still within the skills of a beginner. There are several interior cuts, but I'll give some tips for making them doable. I'll continue with the number 9 Pegas modified geometry blade, since this project is also made with 3/4 red oak. As always, I'll start with the interior cuts. The letter I takes some care to make it accurate. I cut from the pilot hole to one of the edges and followed the line to the first corner. I have a specific method for cutting 90-degree corners, which produces consistent results and nice, crisp corners. I cut until I reach a corner, and I slightly back off pressure on the blade, just enough so it's no longer cutting. Then I use a combination of the saw blade kerf I just created, plus the waist area to pivot the workpiece 90 degrees so it faces the next direction I need to cut. I follow the line to the next corner and repeat the procedure. Learning this technique takes a lot of practice, but it's well worth it. In my experience, a significant percentage of scroll saw patterns require making sharp corners like this. Sharp, crisp corners are a mark of technical expertise. Like the first, this project uses a heart shape for the letter O. Due to its shape, this heart has two sharp points, one at the top and one at the bottom. As I did for the previous project, I cut from the pilot hole to the bottom point of the heart. Again, I backed the workpiece to the pilot hole and swiveled it 180 degrees. The blade's dull side was now facing toward the point at the bottom of the heart, and I moved the workpiece to the point. This left me with an easy swing to line up the blade with the side of the heart, and I started cutting up the side. When I reached the point at the top, I was able to pivot the workpiece so that I could start cutting down the other side of the heart. If you're uncomfortable making that move, you can keep cutting past the point into the waist area. Use that space to turn the wood, then maneuver back to cutting the other side of the heart. This brings us to the letters for the word U. I've cut much smaller letters than these, so they aren't problematic. If you're new to scroll sawing, they may be a challenge. These letters, like the I at the other end, contain several 90-degree turns. I've already explained how to make that turn, so let me pass along another tip about cutting letters. I cut right on the line for most scroll saw cuts, but I take a different approach with letters. With these, I cut just inside the line. Here's my reasoning. If you look at these letters, you'll see that they're spaced closely together. This means that if you cut right on the line, they can be uncomfortably close to one another. And if you stray just a hair over the line, two adjoining letters may touch each other, which is not a good look. Cutting on the inside of the line is even more critical for the letter O. The lines at the top and bottom are very close, and if you overcut them, the center will fall out of the letter O, and you'll be left with a round or oval hole. That can be enough to ruin an entire project. 3 cutouts were needed at the bottom of the pattern, so I made those first. 2 of them had sharp points at the top, but rather than trying to pivot the workpiece to make that extreme angle, I cut from the edge to the point and then stopped. Then I backed the blade out to the edge and made a second cut up the line on the other side. Voila! I had a nice sharp point with no fuss or muss. I chose to make the second cut in the same manner. After reaching the point, I could have backed the blade partway out of the cut, then used the waist area to turn the blade back into the corner, but backing all the way to the edge and then cutting from the other side works well and is probably easier. I usually choose the easiest available method that will produce optimum results. I'll return to that third cutout on the bottom in a while. First, I decided to make the long cut from the left side, then up and around the top. There are some right angle cuts on the left side of the letter L, but there's no need to explain how to do those again, since I demonstrated that technique on the interior letter cuts. Ironically, the cut that takes the longest needs the least explanation, because it's just a matter of following the line around the tops and down the sides of the letters. Now it made sense to make the final cut on the bottom. There were a couple of right angles, but the rest was a combination of straight lines connected by a curve. The last part of the outside cut was for the right side of the letter E. Once again, it was a combination of angles, lines, and curves. I sped up the video for that section since there wasn't anything of great interest to see. Besides, it's always kind of fun to watch things in fast motion. I glued the bottom onto the one project and finished them both with warm satin polyurethane. This week you received 2 projects for the price of 1, and since the price is free, that makes this twice a good deal as usual. As always, I love to read your comments and respond to every one. A like will help me grow the channel and tell YouTube to suggest this video to others. You know how to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and if you're in the mood for binge watching, links to 2 suggested videos to watch next are on the screen now.